Hi, I'm Mia Friedman and you're listening to No Filter, conversations with interesting people that go there. When Melinda Hildebrandt was pregnant, she had an image in her head, like many of us do, of what motherhood would be like for her. She was looking forward to cuddles with the adorable little baby she'd waited for so long to meet, walks in the park, and a feeling of completeness and contentment. But when Melinda's daughter Amelia was born in 2012, she realised, like all mothers, that she was in for a very different experience. It started as a suspicion, one that she kept to herself. Melinda had a feeling that her new baby was a little bit remote. She didn't like being held, and she didn't really interact. Give her time, everyone said. Every child is different. And they kept saying it. But when she was 2, Amelia was diagnosed officially with severe deafness and autism. To help her cope with this experience of mothering a little girl who was very different to the one she'd imagined having, but who she loved with all of her heart, Melinda started blogging. And last year, she released her first book, Amelia and Me, on deafness, autism, and parenting by the seat of her pants. It's a beautiful story and one that will open your eyes. Here's Melinda. How has your journey of motherhood with Amelia been different to what you expected when you were perhaps pregnant?
That's a really big and great question. I guess I had very fanciful expectations as a pregnant woman because she was my first and my only child. So I think I had, a very rose-coloured view of what I thought motherhood was going to be. So
which we all do.
Completely. For me, it wasn't very specific. It was just a very vague kind of set of pictures in my head about walks in the park and going to the beach. And just there was a lot of serenity in my imaginings about how it was going to be. And just that there would be a lot of closeness, so cuddling and just that kind of beautiful bonding. So I was really hungry for that as well. So I thought, we worked really hard to have Amelia, and I just thought I can't wait to just get her and hold her really close. So, and I had a lot of friends and family having little kids around me too. So that helps to inform that expectation. So you see all of the beautiful development, kids becoming little people, and the endless chat and communication. And I just was so excited to watch that experience for myself.
One of the hardest things, from what I understand, when your child has special needs, if they're your first, is that you have nothing to compare their behaviour to. So looking back, were there inklings that she was different to other kids?
Yeah, it's really interesting. If I think back, there were initially just so, there's just the fog of post-motherhood. What the hell is this? What have I actually done? And when you emerge from that fog and you actually can start to engage with the experience more, in a more specific way, I think that I had this very weird inkling that she was a little bit remote, and it was an odd sense because I thought, she's just a baby. How can a baby be remote?
How can you have an aloof baby?
How does one have an aloof baby? It's like she was like on the couch with her hand on her head saying, not today, Mom, that kind of thing. She was, but I just had this, I wanted to, if I wanted to console her or hold her, I just felt like she didn't like that. Yeah. And so I remember my mum saying to me, you are not a huggy, tactile baby. And it really annoyed her. And I thought, all right, this is my experience too. So as you say, because it's your first, you just think, okay, that's her. I'm just learning who she is. So really early on, no inklings, especially Mia that first year. It's such a wondrous time and you're learning, you don't know what the hell you're doing. But I feel like after 3 months when your baby starts to really engage, you just think, oh, this is just them and their unique way. So for me, everything seemed really fine. And I know some people have said to me later they noticed things
about Amelia.
So they might have seen us for dinner and, did the drive home in the car, the drive home debrief. And they're like, something a bit odd about Amelia. But obviously didn't say that to me because how do you even broach that conversation?
And I find that whenever anything happens or you've got any concerns that you express about your kids, kind of at any age, but particularly when they're babies, people rush to reassure you.
Oh, completely, Mia. You are so spot on. So I think as time went on a little bit and I started to try to verbalise some things, so some key developmental milestones were not being met. So gross motor things were a problem.
Like
crawling and walking, for instance. So in our experience, those were the first kind of red flags. But again, everyone's very quick to say the spectrum of development is a long string. Let's not get stressed out here because she's going to get it eventually. So for her, getting it was a 13-month-old crawling for the first time.
And given her eventual diagnosis of, do you say deafness or
I say
hearing
deafness,
impairment?
yeah.
Deafness and
autism.
Yeah. How do those things have an impact on gross motor skills? Like, why should either of those things affect her ability to crawl?
What I understand about autism, for instance, is there's often a correlation with low muscle tone. But also she was big. She was a big roly-poly, a little peach. So I think that there can be some gross motor issues around
And is
that.
hearing associated with balance?
I think so. I mean, no one has made that specific connection to me, but for me it feels
well,
like...
I'm a doctor, so...
Yeah, you're totally so qualified.
Yeah,
like me.
You should have asked me.
I'm a doctor, but I'm the
you.
wrong kind of doctor. Don't ask me to do the Heimlich maneuver. But yeah, I think that with deafness and autism, it's created a really interesting layering of things that have been really hard to decipher from one another, and we kind of are there. But I think, so at the time, gross motor just felt like, well, it was sort of like an isolated thing. So,
yeah.
But also I think what happened is it created a lot of focus on that, and maybe other things were not being looked at, which was, a pretty severe speech development problem. But again, in retrospect, you've got to give a kid a chance to develop or not develop before we start pushing the panic button. And I was really down with that for a while. I was like, I just sort of, particularly as we'd been through IVF, emergency cesarean, I was like, can we stop with the interventions? I just want to be left alone with Amelia. I just want it to be us, and I just want to enjoy her. So we had a little bit of that time, but then these things started occurring, and I thought, I really was keen not to panic. I didn't want to be freaking out. And then when it was time to freak out, I thought, exactly what you said before, people are like, oh, no, it's just fine. People are just going to be trying to scare you. And that is super supportive, but it also blocks you from trying to express the problems. And in the end, I felt like I had to yell it. I think one day I was with my mum and I had this huge meltdown where I was like, no one is listening to me. There is something really wrong here. And it's okay to say that. We're not betraying Amelia if we say that she needs help.
My memory of those early years, a few things, and my youngest is about the same age as Amelia. She's 8 now, isn't she?
Yes.
My youngest is 9. So I seem to recall in hospital, before we came home, he had a hearing test. Did she have that in hospital?
In Melbourne, they had not rolled that service out. So that would have definitely picked up an issue. So I think at that time, unless there was some family history, they just wouldn't have done it.
Now they understand the importance of picking it up early, right? So that's changed.
That has completely changed. And I think within a year or so of Amelia being born, all of the hospitals are now doing it because, I mean, obviously its connection to speech development is so paramount. So if a child is deaf and they need a hearing aid, getting it on them straight away is going to just close this gap straight away for them. So for Amelia, I didn't handle that fact very well for a while. I was kind of like, if only that had happened, because it took 2 and a bit years for us to get to the point where we understood that was why she couldn't speak.
Tell me about that day. You opened the book on that day that she was diagnosed as being deaf.
Yeah.
Tell me how that day unfolded for you.
So that day we were doing some at the time, routine testing for her. When you're about to go into speech therapy, as a recommendation, they just will do a hearing test just to rule that out as an issue. And I just thought, okay, we'll just go through this motion and then we'll get to the other thing. And I I also had in the back of my mind a sense that she'd had a lot of colds and ear infections. So I thought, oh, maybe she's just got lots of fluid in her ears. So that's what they're going to tell us and just say.
And that you might need grommets, worst case.
Get grommets. It was in no way was I thinking this is some permanent thing that's going to change everything.
Aren't you optimistic? I go into every test fearing the worst.
Like I do now.
Of people who go into tests thinking like it'll be fine.
I feel like that optimism died on that particular day, and not in general. I'm like a very glass half full person, but I think now I'm very on the watch for stuff because our experience has been like another piece of the puzzle falling into place. But on that day, it's very much the pre-diagnosis me versus what I became after that, which is, a lot more aware of things that are ready to happen. So, and then I could just tell in this test with these really, lovely audiologists that she was hardly accessing anything that was coming at her through her headphones. And I thought, I just went very still in the room and I just thought, this looks really bad. And I remember my husband, he was holding her on his lap and he was just, because she was really cheerful. She was super cheerful at that time. He was just like, oh, she's, because a lot of the time it's about, oh, your child's really compliant, so they're doing really well. She's behaving well, so good on her. She's smashing it. I was standing in the corner looking and thinking, oh my God, what's happening? So I just held on to that thing about the grommets for a little while until we saw the ENT surgeon upstairs, and he had ruled out any other reason why and just very bluntly laid it out for me that it was a permanent and irreversible hearing loss. But because they double check it a week later, I just didn't fully react to it. It's like I put a pause button on that day, which is this interesting thing that we can do with our brains where we just go, I'm not going to deal with this
I'm
now.
just going to pop that over there and deal with it in a week.
I'm putting it in a dark corner. And I'm just, if I have a week where I'm still in control of this and life is still the same, then it's okay. So, yeah.
But then the next test came back and it was the same.
Yeah, and, the reason, Mia, that I knew it was bad is when we came out of the lifts and one of the audiologists was actually waiting for us there to, guide us. And I thought, oh, they're being, extra careful with us. I thought, yes, this is where we are. And knowing on that day that there were no other obstructions in her ears, I thought, yeah, here we are. And it was at that point when they said the words about her deafness. And
did they use that term?
They didn't. The way that an audiologist would talk about deafness is around the level of hearing loss. So there's a sort of mild, moderate, severe, profound, set of categories, and she was hovering around a moderate to severe level of hearing loss. So what she was missing, crucially, were speech sounds. She could hear very, very loud sounds. So the reason it's hard to know if you have a deaf child, if you've never had one before, is she wasn't not responding to some things. So we could be on the street and a really loud motorbike would go by and her head would swing around. And so obviously you think she's responding to stuff because she is. So the thing to understand about deafness is it's not always a complete and utter thing for everyone. It is for Amelia now. She has now lost everything. This year she's now profoundly deaf. So it's another discovery has been that it's a degenerative hearing loss that she has. So that's
and they don't know what caused it. It was just one of those things.
Yeah, you do all the genetics and stuff, and in a way it doesn't really matter, does it? I've never really been that obsessed with the why unless the why was connected to anything else we needed to know about. And she might want to understand that better later for herself. But for me, it was just like, what do we need to do rather than getting lost in the trying to understand how this happened.
What was your, when you got that second lot of news and you had to take it out of the dark corner and examine it?
Yeah.
Did you cry? Did you go into shock? Did you get very proactive? How did you react?
At the hospital, I was an absolute mess, just a complete primal mess. So, yeah, I just melted down, pretty much. And there's a lot of information coming at you. They're sort of trying to give you all of the information that you're going to need. So you're signing forms, and I just remember thinking, I don't know, I can't even deal with this. And it wasn't a little bit of crying. It was a wailing sort of thing. It was really, guttural stuff. So,
what do you think you were crying for?
I just felt this immediate sense of, are just a huge loss. So part of that, if I can articulate it, is a loss of who I thought I knew as my daughter. I had been her mother for 2 years and had known her as one thing, which is a daughter who doesn't have, deafness and who isn't now facing all of these hurdles. I instantly had this very, very negative view of what her future would hold. So it's weird. It's like enormous waves crashing like repeatedly over you. You just, it was really overwhelming and instant. And perhaps I had been banking those worries over that previous week, and then it all just kind of came out. And people are very kind, but I think I just left all the forms on some chair and just, and then I have to still be with her and not, she's just completely oblivious as a 2-year-old about what's going on, but she's hardwired to my emotions too.
Yeah, absolutely. In those moments, in those, hours and days, were there very specific things that flashed forward to you? Like, oh no, she won't be able to do this, and this is lost to me. And what were some of those things?
I remember the first, I'm really embarrassed about this question now, but the first question I said to the audiologist was, will she be able to go to regular school?
Why would you be embarrassed? That's a perfectly understandable question.
I think because, I don't know, I guess in retrospect, understanding a lot more about who she is and what she's capable of. But I just remember thinking that, I don't know why it was important to me. I can't remember why, but it was just the first thing I thought of in terms of her development. I just thought, where is she going to be? What's going to mean for her? What's she going to be able to do? Who's she going to be? Because before that, your child's life is just, it's a mystery where they're going to go, but it's a very open-ended, multi-layered. There's so many options. There are no barriers. So all I could see were barriers. So I thought about the school thing, and they were very positive, and they said to me, with really good speech intervention and the hearing aids, by the time she's 7 or 8, she should have caught up in terms of the speech. So then I'm thinking, it's a very long road from a 2-year-old to that. So we have all of this work. And then I think I also had this hyper awareness of all of the time I'd spent with her until then, and the ways that you feel you're bonding with your child, particularly as a hearing person, are around what you're saying to your child. So, the ways I had felt I had comforted her through my voice. So I had been, you whisper sweet nothings and you sing lullabies and all of that, and she had heard none of it. And I just felt really betrayed by the universe, if we want to, give it that kind of name, because I just thought I'd been robbed of all of that and that it was a lie. I just thought, this is all a lie. I haven't broken through to her. I don't know how to go about this now. What is it going to mean for me and her? You know what I mean?
How do you see those 2 years now?
So I think I feel so differently, and it takes a really long time, Mia, to go from that grief. And I think the really important thing, like, you have to forgive yourself all of those dark thoughts because they're yours to have, and you just got to, I just remember thinking, I'm going to wallow in this for a little bit, not for ages, because I also had a lot to do. There was so much to do, but I did think I need to just wallow in this for some weeks. The weird thing was, the day that we got the confirmation of the hearing loss, I had been really sick, and I ended up with a perforated eardrum like 2 days after the diagnosis. And so I was
you had pain.
I was really sick. It was the worst pain I've ever experienced outside of childbirth. And I remember thinking, what is going on with this ear stuff in my life? This is so weird. But I just, in retrospect, I just think I forgive that woman for her negativity and all of that, because I'm now in this beautiful world with this amazing person, and I wouldn't change it for anything, even though there are still some really big challenges for her. But she's taught me so much, in that time.
So after that diagnosis, when did the autism become apparent to you? And how did you even unscramble that egg of saying, well, she's behaving this way because she's deaf, or she's behaving this way because there's still something else that we haven't worked out?
Absolutely. So I think for me, the autism thing was always bubbling away underneath the surface. So before the deafness, if I thought about why isn't she responsive, I thought maybe it's that. But it wasn't an urgent whispering. It was just the word would float in and out of my mind, and I thought, I don't know about that. Let's just see. She seemed to me to make a lot of very intense eye contact with me and was very connected to me with her face, and she was reading my face all the time. So again, that is what a deaf person is doing if they're compensating for not having the kind of auditory help, is your face is a map to their life. So I didn't know that at the time. So then after she got her hearing aids, she was about 2.5, some really challenging behaviours started to creep in. And so I immediately thought, well, she is just so frustrated.
What kind of behaviours?
So very angry, sort of rage-filled outbursts and meltdowns, and sort of destructive in the home, destructive of things in the house, and sort of striking out at me particularly, and just trying to get her to do anything, like give her a bath was just a harrowing experience every night. She just would scream like I was killing her. So, and these things had not been part of our experience when she was younger. So it was these emerging behaviours, and I thought, okay, this is a result of someone who would by now have been starting to make some strides in speech, and she doesn't have that, and she's trying to communicate, so this is what's happening. And again, always thinking, let's give this kid some time. She just got these hearing aids. She needs some time. So this is going to get better. And as you say, the scrambled egg mix of these two things, where often what you're seeing are a result of both, but how do you unpick them? And that's been one of the big challenges of the diagnoses sitting alongside each other. So I think that when she went to her deaf kindergarten, her bilingual kindergarten, I started seeing her among other deaf children, and I thought, yeah, she's really different to them. And her kindergarten teachers were like, yeah, she is really different. Some of them had been diagnosed really early, but not all. So I just thought,
with deafness,
yeah.
mean?
So she just didn't know how to interact with other children and was very solitary, and there was just wouldn't make eye contact. So they're trying to teach her Auslan, which was really, it's all about making eye contact.
That's sign language.
Yes, that's correct. So they were just saying to me, there's some tricky things going on. She just doesn't seem to be with us. She's quite disengaged, and just other kids would already be forming little social groups, and she just was very much on the outer of that. So I saw that, and then after a while I thought, by now she should have been developing more speech, and she was learning sign language so easily. It was an amazing experience, but the behaviours were getting more and more challenging. So by the time she was 4, I thought, I don't think that deafness can any longer explain this. Again, people are very quick to say to you, it's fine, it's just her. And I thought, I just don't think so. And her life seems so awful, like her experience of life, she seems so unhappy. I don't think this is who she is. Like, I just don't. And it wasn't until we were referred to an amazing paediatrician who sort of just met her and was like, yeah, I think that you're right to be here. There's definitely some factors here that we need to look at. For me, it was a massive relief, because finding out those reasons helps to understand her and to get her support. So
you write in your book, am I overreacting? Am I just being paranoid?
Yeah,
Are we right to be
completely.
here? Like half hoping, what were you hoping with the answer to that question was going to be?
I mean, it's not that I was hoping. It was more that I just always thought I was going to be told, oh, you're just such a helicopter parent. You've read too many articles on the internet, and you're completely you're over pathologizing this child.
So when the doctor said, oh no,
oh my God,
you
no.
should definitely be here.
Yeah.
You were right to come. Was that a relief, or did that plunge you into another
complete
round of
relief?
despair?
No, it was complete relief. I think by the time I got there, Mia, I I was life was so very difficult that any help was only going to be a positive
So
thing.
being with her in public was difficult?
Yeah, we couldn't really go places without it pretty much always ending in some very full-on display and having to try to remove her and, humiliations I have known in public, right? And at the beginning, you just feel all the eyes on you. Now I don't even care. I don't even see it, that takes...
parenting in public can be challenging at the best of times.
Exactly.
You feel so judged.
You feel so judged, and I feel like our society doesn't really... We're okay with kids in public as long as they're like little automatons who are, super quiet. So any very regular reaction from a kid, making a sound, crying, whatever, I think we're just so judgmental about those things. And I'm the first person now, if I'm in a supermarket and I see a mum just having the worst time, and this is not part of the special needs experience, just the toughness of parenting, I just take the chance and just maybe put a little hand on her arm and just go, you're doing so good. Just keep doing it. And sometimes they just think, who's this weird woman pressing her hand on my arm? Other times they just are like, yeah, okay. Because I know for every person who does that, there's 10 other eyes on her just thinking she's a bad parent.
You write that Amelia's expressive therapist, JM, explained it best when she told me that she's trying to help Amelia to be more forgiving when people fail to understand her and what she needs, and to be more flexible when the world asks things of her that she would rather not do.
Yeah.
I thought that was so interesting and profound.
Yeah.
And a different way to look at it,
Completely.
how she is in the world.
Yeah. And that was a really tough time when we were working with that woman. But forgiveness and flexibility, like, in a T-shirt, that it's kind of like a mantra that I feel like if you can apply to different situations, because what we still try to help Amelia to be more flexible and on her best days she can be, but it's also preparing her for different situations so that she is equipped to be. But forgiving her too, like I think for a time it can be easy to fall into the trap of looking at her and being angry with her about those behaviours, because they are really confronting and
socially disruptive.
Socially disruptive and directed at you. So how do you not personalise that? And it's a big day when you realise that you are not internalising that, and I think the autism diagnosis did that for me, where I'm like, this is all external to me. It's not actually about me. But in fact, it's because she feels so safe with me that I will be
collateral damage.
Totally. And so it's sort of the gift of that diagnosis was an almost endless supply of compassion and patience when I'm in these moments with her. I have my days, but if I know why these things are happening, then I can deal with it. But if it's just a mass of horror, how do I even deal with that? What do I do with it?
One of the most joyful experiences since Amelia was diagnosed for you, you write a lot about the deaf community and Auslan and the idea of deafness as cultural identity. And At first you talk about how you felt very possessive of her because you felt, it's like giving birth to a child that's part of a whole other world that you're not part of.
Yeah. Being
the deaf community. For people who don't know much about deafness as an identity, can you explain a little bit about what you've learned?
Yeah, it's been an entry into an amazing world that I was so not exposed to. I think we have no sense of this community through like mainstream media, and so that's why it's been a real joy to write about it. So maybe I had met one deaf person before I actually gave birth to one. So there is this realization, and I think there's a lot of writings about this, that because most deaf children are born to hearing families, so I think that creates this really interesting tension where you have a community of deaf people who perhaps feel a sense of, a de facto claim over that child as part of their world, but actually they're in the hearing world. And so there's this sort of like cultural fracturing, I think, where how does that become a cohesive thing? And so unless you're in a community where lots of deaf people live together or there's families, it's really difficult. And I know that it's a difficult decision for hearing families whether you go down the path of choosing to offer sign language to your child or not. And so for me, that choice, what it does is it opens the door to that community. And a big part of that choice for me is I went to a family day at an early intervention service, and I saw a panel of teenage deaf young adults talking about their experience. And some of them had not been exposed to sign language as children. And they were okay with that, and they were very fluent in speech, which was what their families wanted for them, and I understand that. But what had happened later in life, and perhaps it's a form of teenage rebellion, is that they were reclaiming this deaf identity via that language, which is such a central part of being a deaf person. And so what I felt was really important for Amelia, apart from just saying, this is a kid with no language, how about we give her two
At once.
At once.
Yeah.
Particularly a visual one, which is going to be easier for her to learn. But I also thought, okay, I don't want to close any doors for her. So if I give her these two languages, it's up to her later. If she wants to be a big part of that community, then she has that entree, which is that language.
I would have assumed everyone would make that choice. Is that not the case?
It's not the case. And part of that is because when you have a deaf child, you are given a choice of two early intervention services, and they're very different. One is pretty much an oral only. You will not be exposed to sign language via that set of services. And the other one is a bilingual kind of total communication approach. So whichever decision you make is actually a really big decision. It's not just, you don't take it lightly, but also if we're all hearing families, how do we really understand the implications of that? So for me, it was instinctive, and I'm really glad, but
were you and your husband on the same page through all of this?
yeah, I mean, I think around all of that, definitely. I'm not going to say that I was like hugely consultative, Mia, around all that stuff.
It's so funny that you say that.
But you do. I mean, you meet. I think I mean that not just inside the family, but you are supposed to meet with the different services. But the first people to respond to us were the bilingual service, and they came to the house, and they were just awesome, and I loved them, and I just instantly thought this is the right fit for her.
Does she speak now?
Yeah, she does speak. She still is pretty severely delayed, and I think Mia, part of that is not understanding that her hearing loss was degrading over time. So we thought, yes, we're making strides, but then her ability to access the sounds. So let's say, if I can break it down for you, we focused on the S sound for about 2 years. Wow. And we thought, she's going to get it because, consonant sounds are softer, so those would be harder for her to reach, but she should have been getting them. And then just things were kind of dropping off in terms of her speech. And there are other expressive language problems that she has too, which are just developmental things as well. Now she's profoundly deaf, right? So her speech development is kind of once again delayed. So she's 8, which is, if I remember when they told me she would have, been fluently speaking with all of the things, but you just never know. You never know what's coming. So she got a cochlear implant 3 months ago on the left side. So this is the first one, and we see how it goes. We didn't want to do both because it would have been too much for her.
Well,
to
it's
handle.
funny you say that because for those of us who don't understand, which was absolutely me before I read your book, and now I understand a little bit more, I thought it was like, oh yeah, you get a cochlear implant and you can hear. So that at one stage in the book, she has a sudden drop in her hearing that then rights itself. But you were faced with that decision, and you were again thrown back into that grieving and not knowing what to do. And I didn't understand why a cochlear implant is not just a fix all.
Yeah, that's right. And it's
can you explain that a little bit?
I can, and I'm really glad that you brought it up. So I mean, even a hearing aid, if you give a hearing aid to a child who hasn't heard anything for 2 years, their brain needs time to understand what those sounds are that are coming at them they've never processed before. So part of it is learning how to just listen before you can understand the sounds, process them. So a baby who's born with perfect hearing is processing all of those sounds before they begin to speak for those years, right? So that's where the big speech delay comes in. So with a cochlear implant versus a hearing aid's augmenting the sound and making it easier for her to hear, and it's blocking out background sound. It's trying to give her all of the access. A cochlear implant is a digital device that's embedded into her cochlea, into her inner ear. And so
you said they had to cut out a bit of skull.
Yeah,
to
they
embed
do.
it.
Yeah, they do.
So it's not just a little chip that they put in like a grommet. I used to think it was like a grommet.
No, seriously. And I think because when you see, if you see a kid in the community with a cochlea, it has all of the outerwear. It has like an over-the-ear thing and a processor that is sitting on their head. And what that's sitting on is a magnet that's embedded in their skull. So, so it's not. It's true to say it's very routine surgery. I mean, Amelia went in at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon one day and was home by 10 a.m. the next day doing moonwalks and stuff out the door as she does. She was like feeling really good. But the recovery is a big thing in the rehab to get that child to start to process these brand new sounds as
What
speech.
are the sounds that they hear?
So it's like, the way she described it to me is that it sounded like aeroplane engines in her head. So, I don't know, it's like a Radiohead digital OK computer set of sounds. So fully digital. So again.
But how is that helpful?
So the way it's helpful is eventually your brain is going to be able to translate that into meaningful sounds, but it's not going to happen overnight.
Wow. So your brain hears a sound that sounds like an aeroplane engine, and in what space of time will it then sound like your voice, or will it never sound like your voice?
So another really great question. If I'm a baby and that's the first thing I get, that is all I'm going to know. My brain is so elastic. So for me, that's going to take less time. If I'm an adult and I've never heard anything before, that cochlea, as this is just me as a lay person, how it's been described to me, is going to make virtually no difference to you. You're going to hear stuff, but it's going to be nonsense and it's not going to be that nice. And so I think I've spoken to one adult who went through that process. They just wanted to hear something, but once it was switched on, they hated it so much that they just decided to, forego it. So the thing about a cochlea is that it's permanent. So once that device goes into the inner ear, it's there forever. So, but if I take all the processor stuff off and the processor and the magnet, etc., if I take that off, your kid is still profoundly deaf, like if they're not wearing all of that. So I think another thing is when we say bionic ear, I think people just think you're just hearing all the stuff.
It's just like flicking on a switch, turning up the volume.
But it still needs to, it still needs to be processed, and then it's, the brain needs to do its work. So we are late to the game for a cochlea. Because she's 8. But the reason it was worth doing is she's still young. She's had some really good years of really great brain stimulation, hearing what she's heard before. And without it, she's not going to learn how to speak more fluently than she does. And she can make herself understood. But what I want for her is a fluency in both languages. So she is becoming very fluent in sign language because she goes to a school for the deaf. And I love that for her. And I think she's a very proud deaf girl, so it's a big deal to her. The signing is actually a big part of her identity.
Do most of her friends at school have cochlear implants?
Pretty much all of them, actually. Yeah, so you can only get a cochlear if you're pretty much profoundly deaf. So it's not actually an option if you have some residual hearing. A hearing aid's probably going to be okay. So that's another thing to say is it's not like available to everyone. There's protocols around it because to insert a cochlear implant will more likely than not destroy any residual hearing that a child has. So again, as you recounted, when we were looking at it once before, we just weren't sure if she had something there or not. And it turned out to be just an anomaly. But this time, there's
you
definitely
had nothing to lose, really.
Yeah. So she's got a hearing aid on the other ear and it's doing a little bit of work. It doesn't have a lot happening, but it's helping her cope with what's going on the other side. 3 months in, answering your question about how long does it can take up to a year for the full benefits. Mm-hmm. But what I'm seeing in her appointments, we have weekly mapping appointments where they adjust the levels to gradually increased more sound to her, is that she's now able to repeat sounds back to her audiologist that she was not able to access 3 months ago.
How's Amelia today?
How is she today? She's amazing today. So 3 months on from this cochlea, I actually can't believe how well she's transitioned. I was a bit worried because of her autism. I thought, this is a very new thing. Need to get her to accept wearing it. But I think because all of her friends have them, she felt a bit left out. So she was weirdly excited to be going in. And then I think when she got to the hospital and realised it was surgery, she was like, oh, hang on a second. Can we review this? I'm like, no. So she's so feisty and funny, and she still has her moments, but she's maturing all the time at her own rate. And I'm so proud of the person she is, because she's very sensitive to other people. She's very kind. I feel like sometimes she's parenting me like if I take a hand off the wheel in the car, she's like slamming it back there. Or if I look away from her when I'm talking, she'll grab my face and pull it back. So she knows who she is. She knows what she needs to get by in the world, and she's going to be really assertive about it. So as much as that's giving me like many grey hairs, it's just an amazing thing. So she loves school passionately, and I think today she's finding out her new teacher, and she's just awesome. Her friends FaceTime each other on the weekends because they can sign to each other. Sometimes there's like a four-way Auslan conversation going on. Technology has been amazing. So amazing. So yeah, I think like every parent, just when you think, oh, she's like, everything's really relaxed right now, there's always another challenge. There's always another challenge, but I think that just gives you a good perspective on life, not to be waiting for the wolf at the door, but actually to just be really open to what life can bring. Do you know what I mean?
Had you planned to have more than one child?
It's really hard to say because we couldn't have more. And because she was IVF, I think at the time I was thinking, oh, do I really want to go through that again? Maybe we're just lucky to have one. And then when everything started to emerge and we understood what was happening with Amelia, I thought, well, I think maybe we're meant to just have one because this is going to be a lot of work. But then when I was about 35, 36, I went through like full menopause, which explained my fertility and, the fact that I'm always perspiring at weird times of the day. It was just like, I think the decision has been made for me. Yeah. So, so I'm not going to say that I don't have moments where like a baby is like being carried past me when I like grab a little chubby foot or something.
Sniff its little just baby head.
Yeah, give it a little kiss, and then that's like creepy. But I still feel really lucky. Like if we hadn't done what we did when we did it, we wouldn't have Amelia. And I think she's kind of like, I don't know, we got a puppy the other day, so I feel like I now have another daughter who's also very high maintenance. I picked her because she looked really quiet.
Oh my careful God. What you wish for.
Yeah, she's not, but that's just that's my brand, So,
and are you still updating your blog?
I haven't had a lot of time to do that. I did a bit of an update about what was happening with the book, but I certainly have been keeping a video log of the cochlear implant progress. So in these appointments, it's been amazing to watch that arc of development. So, and people have said to me that they would really appreciate seeing some of those updates as well. And I've just had so many amazing experiences talking to parents for whom it's been like a great ride as well. So
you said you've discovered quite a lot of people who have that deafness autism combination. You thought that it was just not just you.
Yeah, but I didn't know how common it was, and I think, I mean, obviously there's a lot written about autism memoirs, parent written memoirs. Deafness there's not a lot around about that. It's a lot more unique, but as a combination. But then I think again, what I'm really happy about is that happily parents of kids with a range of special needs, not even deafness or autism, are finding it relatable too. So I'm really happy that it isn't like a fixed or closed experience the way that it's written.
No, I learned a lot. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Thanks for listening to No Filter. I know there have been lots of people who've been asking if we would feature a story, an interview with someone who had a child with special needs. And that's why we were very, very pleased to bring you this one. Melinda's able to speak about her life with Amelia and her experience of mothering her in just the most beautiful way. If you want to buy her book, which I highly recommend you do. It's called Amelia and Me, and you can find it at any good bookstore or at apple.co/Mamma Mia, which is where you can find all the books written by the authors and the different people that we interview here on No Filter. I'm Mia Friedman, and you can also find my book at apple.co/Mamma Mia. And I also hang out on Instagram, where you can find me at Mia Friedman or Lady Startups. This show was produced by Eliza Ratliff, and we will both see you on mamamia.com.au.